Good Monday morning. Thoughts from the car today. Question. Do you suffer from too nice syndrome? Sometimes I do. I have noticed a pattern in myself, and I've talked about this before with people pleasing, that sometimes I'm just too nice. And I want to talk today about why being too nice and having too nice syndrome is detrimental, what we can do about it, where it comes from, what we can do about it, and if we see a friend of ours who's being too nice, because that's something else I've been noticing is some of my friends are just too nice. And how to help them overcome those, consequences of it and to not be too nice, right? Now, caveat, we do live in a world where being kind is super important and being nice is not a bad thing. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is the too niceness where you put all of your needs at the back burner and everybody else's needs are ahead. So you're trying, we're talking about the person who tries excessively hard at the expense of their own needs to make sure everybody else is happy and good. So I'm talking to you moms. I'm talking to you people who are in relationships and feel like it's unequally yoked and you're taking on too much of the mental load and all of those kinds of things. And this can be intimate relationships. It can be familiar relationships. It can be, friendships. It can be work relationships. When we are too nice, it is detrimental to us. So first, let's talk about where too niceness comes from. What are the reasons why people are too nice? And you may identify with one of these. Oftentimes it's because of the fear of conflict. People don't like to have conflict in their relationships or in situations. So instead of standing up for themselves, standing up for their needs, creating a boundary, instead we're too nice about things because there's this fear of conflict. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't trust that our relationships are solid enough sometimes. We're worried about the negative consequences of not being nice. It also can stem from low self-esteem. So if you don't have confidence in yourself, or if the person that maybe you find yourself being too nice to puts you down a lot, you're not going to have great esteem of yourself and you're not going to have confidence. And so you're going to feel like you deserve being too nice to people and, not being treated kindly. Pleasing others. We've talked about this so many times, people pleasing. People please because they do it because that's how they feel like they're going to receive love. So if you're in that camp, you're probably being too nice. If you identify as a people pleaser, you're probably in that camp of too niceness. And then there are the cultural and societal standards and expectations. As a mom, as a woman, oftentimes there is a societal and cultural standard that we be nice and that we smile. I don't know how many times I've heard a man say something like, "You'd be beautiful if you would smile more." Are you serious? And this leads to niceness syndrome, where we feel like we can't have our full range of feelings, that we have to just be nice. We have to just be happy and not have our full range of feelings. There's just this expectation, specifically of women, I feel like, where if you're not nice, then you're a bitch. If you're not super sweet, sticky nice, then you're put in the bitch category. It's one or the other. It sucks. It's part of society. It's part of our culture. And I don't stand for it. I'm me. I'm authentically myself. Women are authentically themselves. We're not too nice all the time. We can stand up for ourselves. We can stand for things. And sometimes it's going to be interpreted as not being nice. And that's okay. That's okay. You don't have to have everybody love you and like you. And I'm preaching to the choir there. That's because I struggle with that myself. And then there's also childhood experiences. So if as a child your needs were not met and you were punished for expressing yourself in a negative way, whether being told you're a negative person or why do you always think negative, or, just any kind of negativity, like you didn't like something, well, why don't you like that? That's not okay. Anything where your needs were not met, you were not loved and accepted, and instead you were judged harshly as a child for expressing something other than being nice, then you may be in that, people pleaser category of being too nice and being too nice to people. So negative consequences of this. There are always consequences for every choice that we make. So when we make the choice to be too nice in situations, there are negative consequences. Some of those negative consequences are oftentimes in relationships, if one person is being tries excessively to be nice and do the things and take on everything and don't have conflict, there's usually an unhealthy power balance between the two people. And this goes for every relationship. It can go for parental relationships, intimate relationships with partner, work relationships, friendships, professional relationships even. There are so many different kinds of relationships that there can be an unhealthy power balance because of one person's too much niceness. Resentment builds. When you are in any kind of relationship, resentment can build with the person who is being too nice because they'll feel unappreciated. They're going to feel like they're not seen. They're going to feel like they're not valued. So resentment builds over time in these kind of relationships if you're being too nice. And I have experienced that myself. I have absolutely experienced that, where the resentment just builds and builds and builds, and you just, it becomes too much. What also happens when we are being too nice is you lose a sense of yourself. Like you lose your own identity. You lose like what you like and who you are. And because you're always worried about being too nice to people, you kind of lose your own opinions. You lose things that you enjoy. For the longest time, I did not wear bright lipstick. And the reason for this, even though I've always loved it, was there were multiple things, but one of the things is that somebody had said something about how it made me like look aggressive. It made me look like I was not a nice person and that I was too aggressive. And so I stopped wearing it because I wanted to be seen as nice. I wanted to be too nice. And I worried about what someone else thought. And I definitely lost a part of myself because I love it. And I think it's so fun. And it's just part of my personality. And so I lost a part of myself by making a choice to be too nice because I didn't want others to see me in a certain way. And I was being too nice. Like instead of just doing something I enjoyed for myself. This also oftentimes in relationships, the relationship will become very unsatisfying. And it's multiple things contribute to this. The loss of self, the resentment, unhealthy power dynamics. This all can lead to feeling unfulfilled and not having a genuine connection with the person that you're in relationship with when you're being too nice in that relationship. And it's really important that we understand that these consequences, that this is at our expense as the too nice person. And you can't maintain your own individuality when you're being too nice. Because when we're being too nice, we're self-sacrificing. Emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, you will go through absolute exhaustion and burnout because you're being too nice. You're doing all the things. You're maintaining the relationship. You're trying so excessively in whatever relationship it is that you're sacrificing yourself. You're sacrificing your well-being to maintain this relationship. There's usually a lot of suppression of your own feelings. And again, this goes back to like the fear of conflict. You want to avoid conflict. Because you want you want harmony. But the problem is that it's not authentic harmony. It's not real. It's just created by you not expressing your feelings. It's very superficial. And oftentimes this also a consequence that comes from this is that then there's this tolerance of unhealthy bad behaviors of the other person that you're in a relationship with, whatever kind of relationship it is. When we are being too nice and we are not creating boundaries, we tolerate the worst behaviors. We oftentimes when you're in the relationship, especially like intimate relationships, I feel like, you downplay the negative things about the other person and you allow unhealthy patterns to persist because again, the fear of conflict, suppression of your feelings, you're sacrificing yourself, all of these things, like you're tolerating bad behavior, you're tolerating unhealthy behaviors. And then that affects you as the too nice person, as well as all of those around you that you're being too nice to. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. And then when you remove yourself from the relationship, whatever kind of relationship it is, that's when you have more clarity of like, oh my gosh, these are the patterns of behavior. And then you vow to yourself that you're never going to be too nice again in whatever relationship it is. And then that creates like bitterness and more resentment and walls to be built instead of just healthy boundaries. Emotional exhaustion. I kind of talked about this where you go into burnout, like you just burn out from everything. And this affects your physical health when you get into burnout. And you lose like your own self-worth. You lose your self-worth because you feel, and this contributes to perpetual low self-esteem and low confidence in yourself because you're constantly doing for others and you're not taking care of yourself. And I think overall, the major consequences is there's just this lack of authenticity in us in general when we're being too nice. We emotionally distance ourselves from everybody and we just become emotionally distant in every relationship when we are being too nice in certain relationships out of fear or whatever the reason is of why we're being too nice. So how do we overcome? How do we overcome too niceness? And I want to talk about, and this is two parts, is for ourselves, what do we do? If we're the person who's being too nice, what are the things we can do to overcome that? And then also I want to take it from the vein of when you notice your friend or your partner or a business partner or a coworker, if they're being too nice in certain situations and it's like a pattern of behavior. So we're going to take it from both veins. So first, how do we overcome too much niceness in ourselves? The first thing is we have to identify patterns. We have to identify our patterns of behavior. When we can see patterns of behavior in ourselves, then we are able to decide whether that pattern of behavior is healthy or not. And we can see the consequences of that behavior. We have to have self-awareness. So this is about self-awareness, knowing ourselves, seeing the consequences of our own actions, and seeing a pattern of behavior. So we have to be able to step back and kind of really look at what we're doing, why we're doing it, and if it's actually a healthy behavior for ourselves or not. When we notice this pattern of behavior, then the next thing is we have to decide if we're going to set the boundary. What is the boundary that we are going to set for ourselves in particular relationships where we are being too nice, or all of our relationships? Maybe we're just a too nice person in general. What what is it that we need? What boundaries do we need to set? Remember, boundaries are not just for ourselves. It's also for others. Because oftentimes when we're too nice to others, we're doing everything for them. I'm thinking of like parental relationships when we're doing everything for our kids and then they're not having to suffer the consequences of their own choices and actions. And that doesn't allow them to build resilience. And that doesn't allow them to, feel those consequences of their choices to help them make better choices in the future. So if boundaries are not just for us, they're also for those that we love and care about or we're in relationship with where we're being too nice. So we have to set boundaries and maintain them. Self-care. We talk about self-care all the time. Taking care of yourself is not a privilege. It is a right. You need to take care of yourself first. You cannot help others if you cannot first help yourself. It's just plain and simple. And I'm not talking about spa days and all those kinds of things and eating chocolate. I'm talking about showering. I'm talking about getting adequate sleep. Just taking time for yourself, having a moment for yourself is absolutely a requirement. It is not a reward. Self-care is not a reward. It is a requirement. I think the next thing is that we have to challenge those negative beliefs. We've talked a lot about that lately. Challenging our negative thoughts, challenging negative beliefs, identifying them, making sure, see if they're true or not, replacing and then repeating the affirmation over and over. We have to seek support. We can seek support. We have to talk to our friends. We have to talk to our close, safe people. We talk to a counselor, talk to a coach. There are resources out there. We have to be willing to reach out. We have to be willing to get the support that we need in order to overcome our too niceness. And then, as always, we celebrate our successes as we go on in this journey. When we see ourselves break a pattern, we need to celebrate that. We have to acknowledge that. And again, that goes back to talking to our self people and acknowledging when we've made a stride, when we're growing. Now, what about if we see a friend who is being too nice and we see the consequences in their own lives and maybe they're just blind to it? How do we handle that? I think the first thing that we have to remember is that it's very delicate situation to talk about these things and helping someone overcome. So we have to practice compassionate honesty. That means that we have to be honest with the person and share our true feelings with them about a situation, maybe where we're feeling too nice or maybe where they're being too nice. Have that honest communication with someone. I think something that we too can, for ourselves specifically, is we have to embrace no. And I think that we can help our friends embrace no as well. This is part of self-care. And I think also something that we can do for ourselves and for our friends when we see them being too nice in a situation is scheduling check-ins. We schedule check-ins with ourselves and we ask, am I compromising myself too much in this situation or in this relationship? And then we also help our friends and kind of check in with them and keep that accountability with one another. I think it's important for us to have check-ins about this, especially if we see ourselves as a chronic too nice person or, people pleaser. If we're in that scale, is that we have to schedule these check-ins with ourselves to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and that we're not being too nice and we're not getting railroaded all the time. I think that when we express our concern to our friends, when we see them in a pattern of too niceness, it's really important for us to express the concern with empathy. And really get across that the reason why we're bringing this up is that we care about their own well-being. And it has nothing to do with us controlling or you should do it this way or this is my opinion. It's just because I care about your well-being and I see some of the things going on. Using I statements when we are talking to our friends about this to help them overcome too much niceness in situations is we use I statements. So we use I statements like, I've noticed that, or I worry that. And we put it on ourselves, not on them, and as criticism. It's just an observation that we have made. And we express that with empathy, concern, and love for that person, not judgmental criticism for sure, that you're doing this wrong. No you statements, use it as an I statement. I think that's super important when we're talking to our friends about them being too nice or they're being taken advantage of or they're not, keeping boundaries raised. And I think something else that we have to talk about when we're talking to our friends is that we have to highlight those consequences. Again, we talk about I've noticed that when you are worrying too much about so-and-so and doing too much for them, I notice that then you worry about a lot of other things. I notice that you are not yourself. You're not, happy. I worry that you are not taking care of yourself the way that you need to be taking care of yourself. I worry that your health is at jeopardy. So it's using those I statements and sharing the potential consequences for the action of what they're doing. And then we offer support. We listen, we offer advice, we encourage them to have self-reflection. And I think then we also have to have patience with them because it's just not going to change overnight. And we help them with the accountability piece of things. So challenge today. Your challenge today is this. I want to challenge you to ask you first, do you suffer from too nice syndrome? If you are the one who suffers from too nice syndrome, I want you to think about some of the ways that I mentioned that we can overcome. And I want you to try to enact the boundaries that are needed, with whatever the too niceness is, and really ask yourself, what is the reason why I'm being too nice? I think so often getting to the root of why we do something is super important. You can use my 5 layers of why, of asking why, why do I feel this way? Well, why do I do that? What is the why? So the 5 layers of why, If you are someone who sees one of your friends or family members or someone that you love and care about is being too nice, try to schedule a check-in with them. Maybe talk to them, again, in empathy, in love, expressing your concern for them. It's hard, guys, being too nice, because we want to be seen a certain way and perceived a certain way. That's why we do it. All right. Have a great Monday, and don't be too nice.